The internet is tricky. I feel like you click on a link and then you wake up 5 years later with a beard and you're like, what happened? But no, I suffer from depression. It's a great way to start off a set, you know. Sorry to go blue right away, but it's true. I've had it my whole life, and you know, it's like a lot of times I'll feel sad for no reason, but then I'll remember some of the reasons, you know? I'm like, this actually makes a lot of sense. This adds up. There are certain types of weather that are better for depressives. Like, I love it when it rains. Reminds me why I got in the whole sad game, you know? Keeps me grounded. Whenever it's like pouring outside, as a sad person, you can turn to any random optimist on the street and just be like, hey, you're in my world now. What? Yeah, I relate to people who have self-doubt. I have a lot of anxiety. Don't be mistaken by the sassy drag queen stage persona. I know it's confusing, but yeah, I have a lot of anxiety. I don't know. I feel like it's weirder to not have anxiety than to have it, because I feel like if you're not scared, you're not paying attention, you know? Like, I feel like if you open a newspaper today, skim maybe 3 headlines, you're just like, seems cool. It's like, what? Everything's on fire. Even the newspaper is on fire. Like, what are you so chill about? And you know, sometimes when you tell people you have anxiety, they're always like, well, you know, there's nothing to fear but fear itself. It's like, okay, have you checked out some of fear's work? It's like pretty much churning out solid gold hits, making some great points, rarely misfires. And like, if you don't have anxiety, the way I would describe it is like there's an edgy improv group in your brain, and it just needs like a one-word suggestion to spin like countless scenarios that no one's comfortable with. Like, the whole time you're just like, when will this show be over? I just came to be supportive. None of these thoughts have a future. So people get into stand-up for a lot of different reasons, mostly to escape your past, sometimes to hide from your future. But I kind of did things backwards. Like, I got into stand-up comedy to pursue my real dream, which is to do temporary administrative support in an office. Thank you. That is where I truly excel. I've worked in a lot of offices, though, and I would say my main regret is I've never done this. Like, I wish just one time when I've been sitting in a tense company meeting, I'd stood up in the middle of it, apropos of nothing, and gone, I think the bigger issue here is I can't read. I love offices because awkward stuff like that happens all the time, and you can't fully address it because you have to see those people the next day. Like, one time I worked in a different office, try to keep up, and this happened to me in an elevator. A woman walked in, then I walked in, then a man walked in. So far, all innocent, that's important. Button panel is right here. Woman presses 5, I press 4. The man's too far away, so he goes, 6, please. I was raised well, so I press 6. He goes, why, thank you. And then, the woman goes, oh, you're welcome. That is an example of taking credit for someone else's work on the smallest scale possible. Like, she was using manners in a rude way. I don't think that's how you do it. What are her circumstances that she just has to steal other people's thank yous in elevators? Like, when she walked in, was she just like, I'm not here to make friends, I'm here to win. Where's my rose? And let me just tell you, there are a lot of time and space constraints to seeking revenge in an elevator. It's not a lot of room to move. We're on the clock, so I had to think fast, go straight to primal instinct, survival modes. You can't judge me for what I did. I just looked her dead in the eyes, and I farted really loudly. One thing I wasn't wasn't ready for when I moved there was New York is the fashion capital of the country, so there are always models walking around, which was kind of a bummer. Just like feral models wandering the streets that no one warns you about. And they're always stepping out of buildings when you least expect it, just like ruining your day. Just like, ah. And you're like, no, I'm down here, you know? I don't have much. I don't know. Models to me feel like self-esteem pickpockets. Like they're fine at a distance, but then you directly walk by one and you're just like, no. I have nothing. Even my personality's the wrong shape. People talk about New York moments. I think there should be a separate category called New York breaking points. I had mine a couple months ago. I was walking in Manhattan. I just saw a loose muffin that had fallen on the sidewalk. And I just kicked it really hard. I was like, I didn't know that about myself. I didn't know I was a muffin kicker. Like the top shot off in one direction, the body kept rolling. I was like, sick! Children, look away! It's like if you see something, say something. What if it's you? What if you're the something? I've also been getting into the internet. I don't know if you guys have been. It's pretty fun. Yeah, I got my AOL CD. I'm finally on there, but the internet is tricky. I feel like you click on a link and then you wake up 5 years later with a beard and you're like, what happened? My latest Achilles heel on the internet is list articles. Listicles, I believe, is the time-saving term. I don't know if you guys are familiar with them, but the whole point, they're known as clickbait. Like, the whole point is just to get you to click on the link. They just want those hits. And there's a lot of sites that specialize in them. There's like BuzzFeed, HuffPo, Third Site is doing great work. But, you know, at first they started out normal in terms of being enticing. Like, a typical one might be something like 12 actresses before they were famous. You'd be like, oh, well, I'm not famous. Let's relate. Or it'd be like, 37 puppies, so cute, you'll be mad. And you're like, I'm already mad. Bring it on. And then I feel like they ran out of all the normal ones and they slowly started getting weirder because they have to put up like 70,000 a day. It's a valuable job. So you would start getting ones that were a little odd, like 51 burritos without makeup. Guess there has to be some airbrushing involved. Or it'd be like 300 ways to prove you're real. Am I real? Better check 100 of those. I can't wait till they run out of all the weird ones and it just comes back full circle to mundane again. And it's just like, the 10 Commandments!